Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, June 27th. I'm here in Spring, Texas with my cousin, the Roadrunner 556. Today, we're going to go to Huntsville, and we're going to go take a look at that statue that they have of Sam Houston. I think it'll be a great time, so yeah, just got to wait for them to open. Probably have breakfast at Denny's or somewhere, I don't know. But, yeah.
Why did I want to do Sam Houston? Well, it was, the idea was instigated basically by a meeting at Austin College of the representatives from the university and from the city. And they had gotten together to plan the big bicentennial exhibition for March the 2nd, 1993. This was in 91 when we met. And people suggested various things they wanted to do, and when it came around to my time on the table to suggest something, I suggested the big Sam Houston statue. Why? On retrospect, I'm not sure. Craziness, partial insanity is one of the reasons. Of course, Sam Houston was the great hero of our state, a great hero of mine as a kid growing up in Huntsville, which was his hometown the last 4 or 5 years of his life. We grew up with the legend. As a little kid, I remember reading 6'6", which was a child's version of the Marquis James biography of Sam Houston. And I grew up in the Sam Houston Park, and my great-great-grandfather was the postmaster in Huntsville during Sam Houston's tenure. So that just, the Sam Houston legend comes down through my family. So it was obvious that if I want to do somebody big and famous, it would be him.
In the early 1990s, I had the honor of serving as a mayor of the city of Huntsville. And in 1993, Sam Houston State University had a major celebration celebrating the 200th birth of Sam Houston. And as a result of that wonderful celebration on campus, the idea of a statue came out of that. And David Addix was very supportive of that and initially wanted the university to accept the statue. They were reluctant for whatever reason, so David and I got to talking. Matter of fact, it was interesting. We ran into each other in a restaurant in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and we got to talking about that, and I told him the city would be very enthusiastic about accepting the statue as a gift.
It took 3 years to make it. It would have taken longer if it hadn't been for a guy named Gene Pipes that pushed me along and came in and said, you know, we got to get this thing done. And I said, well, this is a work of art, you know, it takes its time. And he says, no, this is a work, this has got to be up in time.
As the city manager, who had had no experience with anything like this, particularly, it was the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do something really significant.
My view for the statue was to change the image of Huntsville. We have been known as Prison City. We have been known as execution capital, and I thought we needed a positive image rather than perhaps a negative image.
So they came to the chamber one day and asked us if we would participate in it to some level. And at the time, our chairman of our board was Arlena McLaughlin. And I remember she and I being a little bit stunned when they said, could you maybe help us out and raise the money for the base of the statue? Well, this was such an unusual project and such an opportunity that certainly we wanted to be a part of it, but nobody had any idea what the actual cost of building such a statue and funding the space and all would be.
But as long as we weren't going to spend tax money, and as long as it wasn't going to take away from the other things the city was doing, okay. It turned out to be the best public-private partnership project that could be imagined.
We set about the task of trying to raise money, and when we did, we decided that what could be better than to build brick pavers around the base of the statue so that people who had a hand in the project could have their name on the statue for eternity.
The chamber raised $67,000 in about 3 months. No one would have predicted that. No one would have By that time, though, we had had some engineering work done, and we knew that 67,000 wasn't going to do it. So when they got to 67,000, Dee breathed a big sigh of relief, and everybody had a little party and a celebration. And I said, "Don't stop, keep going."
And I think the end number of money raised, and some of it was in-kind gifts, was some over $300,000. So they really did a great job. I think the next thing that came up was the operation of the statue. And I think maybe Gene had the idea of the visitor center and the gift shop. And we approached the chamber about operating both the visitor center and the gift shop.
And being the Convention and Visitor Bureau component of the community as contracted by the city, that was a project that we took a lot of pride and interest in and knew that there would be a role for us to play as visitors came to the community.
And the benefits to our community have been just huge. Tourism, and of course tourism generates retail sales all over town. It also promotes all the other historic items in town that people can see. And it's been overall a wonderful project for the city of Huntsville.
I wanted to do something that represented strength of character. And I think standing there very erect with his cane and looking very authoritative and calm was the strength of character that he demonstrated later in his life as much as when he was a young man.
The Alamo is San Antonio. The Capitol building is Austin. The statue would be the visionary image change that Hodge wanted and that David Addix proposed it for. There was no question.
Every time I would drive to Huntsville from Houston, I could see sort of a silver-colored tree of some type straight ahead among the pine trees. And I kept looking at that and I'm thinking that's where it should be, because you see it straight on from the highway from 6 miles away. So I went and located that little silver-colored tree and said that's where it's going to be.
David is an artist, and he will forever be an artist. And in the first few visits I ever made to the statue construction site, when they were building the boots, the first parts, David said, "You know, an artist is never through until he can't touch it anymore."
Well, the materials I chose for the statue are just the most logical materials for anything huge and large like that. Bronze, obviously, the classic material for statues, is good up to about 15 feet or so. Beyond that, the cost, the weight, everything else gets very complicated. So anything over 20, 30, 40 feet, concrete is the choice. Well, to build a big one, you always have to build a small one first. You have to have a model to go from, because all of the artistic decisions have to be made on a small model. Once you get going big, you can't really change things that much. So I did a straight model, the model you see behind the regular 6'6" model, and then just sort of multiplied that by 10, took all the dimensions off of that, and did it in 10-foot sections and erected it.
The base itself is a concrete pour, monolithic pour, constant. Once you start, you don't stop pouring the concrete, so there's no seams. And the framework itself is 28 at the top, 28 foot square, and 30 at the bottom, but then there's 5 more feet in the ground below what you can actually see. And in that framework is 1-inch rebar tied on 1 foot centers, horizontally and vertically. So there's no way to even climb through there. It's like a giant jungle gym, but it is so tight together that even small children couldn't get through from one side to the other. You could walk on top of the framework while the pour was going on and nothing moved. And there's 36-inch sleeves set through the steel, and all of this iron is welded to the sleeves so that the I-beams that are brought in slide into the sleeve all the way to the bottom sub-base. And so you've got a 24-inch with 1-inch plate welded on the side up to what would be about waist high. And then the rest of it sticks on up without any additional support. The statue itself is a sandwich side section. If you cut a hole in the thing, you would have, first of all, on the inside, a tubular square frame, making the general template, top and bottom, from each section so that they match up perfectly. In other words, from the boot to the bottom of the knee, those two pieces were made identical so that one fits right on top of the other. Then wire mesh is attached to the framework, and ordinary gray concrete is squished into the thing just like you would put plaster on a wall. And then comes the first fiberglass section, which is a mesh over that. And another layer is added. Each of these layers progressing out. And then you get out to the outside and you have white concrete, bright white sand, bright white lime. And when you put that on there with the fiberglass mesh in the mix of the concrete, then you've got things tying together there that create a layered skin of about 4 to 6 inches thick that is just pretty amazing. And the idea that in that kind of a mass that you can get the deflections and the light and shadow effect that's on the statue, the undulations in the coats and the garments, the facial definition and all that, and still make it work is tremendous. But you're building it from the inside out, so when you're in the inside of the statue and it's finished, what you're seeing is a gray plaster that you really can't believe is all that there is. David, we've got until October the 22nd, and this statue is going to be finished. It doesn't have to be totally finished. It could be partially finished. Everybody will have a good time. The party will be grand. No, we're going to be finished.
October 21st, 5 p.m., the day before the dedication. The statue is still not finished, in my opinion.
David was still up on that scaffolding. And 3 times I told him to come down, knowing that if he could touch it, it was still not going to be finished.
And I was up there on the scaffolding working on his certain areas. And Gene Pipes knew that just a few short hours hence, people would start arriving and wanting to see a finished statue. So he says, it's finished. I said, no, Gene, it's not finished. He says, it's finished.
He wouldn't come down. So I told the guys working with me to start taking the scaffolding apart.
Well, I was up, 40 feet in the air, and he started taking the scaffolding down. What, am I going to hang on to a paintbrush or something?
We got down to the last frame, 10 by 10 locked together. He looked around, there was nothing else around. Hammer was in his hand. He had second and third thoughts about, well, if I can hit it one more time, he'll have to put the stuff back. David, come down. We took the scaffolding down. David got to ride some of it down. It was pretty interesting.
So he took all my equipment down, and I said, okay, it's finished. And that was the last time I've been up there, and so it's finished.
The story about the concrete mixer is probably the one that is the most romantic of the whole legend of the statue. David used the same 1-yard Sears concrete batch mixer for the whole project. Cleaned it out, reused it every day. At the end of the project, when all the pieces had been stacked except for the top of the shoulders and the top of the head, we lowered the Sears batch mixer from the crane down through the middle and positioned it in the middle of the chest, the heart of the project that will be found someday by archaeologists, is a Sears batch mixer that made every cubic yard of the concrete in the entire project.
Well, my vision for the statue was, as I mentioned earlier, was to change the image of the city of Huntsville. And I initially thought, as I said, it would take about 3 to 5 years. It didn't take that long. It only took about 18 months. So from that standpoint, I think that statue has lived up to my expectations. I think in some other areas it's far exceeded it. Tourism and the number of visitors. I understand the number of visitors who have signed the book has been visitors from over 102 nations around the world.
Today, we have many, many more people who see us as the home of Sam Houston. And I think that statue had a lot to do with it. The growth in our university and our museum, the improvements there, everything in our community that has to do with Sam Houston has been directly impacted because of this statue.
And to have that much public-private participation, have John Q. citizens from the poorest to the wealthiest, all saying, I want to be part of that. That's a pretty remarkable consensus.
That's the biggest piece I've ever done. It might be the biggest piece I'll ever do, but people do enjoy it, do see it, do report back to me, I'm sure to the Chamber of Commerce and everybody else. So I think it's a good deal being there, yeah.
So we just got back from Huntsville, Texas. We had to make a couple stops first. One of them was the brand new camp that's somewhere in the Huntsville area, Camp Strake. And Christian wanted to take a look at some antiques, so we went there, and we ate at a little place called the Mason Jar Cafe, which is pretty good. Their food was amazing. If you get a chance to go in that area, check it out. And plus, we got to see the Sam Houston statue in Huntsville. So it was a very impressive monument, if I do say so myself. So, yeah, we're just going to chill for a bit and continue on with the rest of our day. Well, I went around with my cousin's neighbor. We went to go to a couple Goodwill shops, and we even went through a car wash, which was pretty fascinating and satisfying to me. It was actually pretty cool. And Christian and I had smash burger for dinner, which is really good. Their sweet potato fries, though, they're amazing. If you get a chance to go see one of those in Texas, go there. It's awesome. Anyways, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Good night.